Hello, welcome to Tansy's Garden. I'm Katie, I'm the proud owner of this garden in the southeast of the UK, and I thought I'd take you along with me as I set up my garden journal for 2023. This is a gorgeous candle that I found in a UK shop called Paper Chase. It is sage and eucalyptus and it smells absolutely amazing and I love it. I have a Moleskine notebook that I bought a while back, and I'd actually started setting this up already because I have these big dreams of setting up my own garden design company, and so I'd started setting it up and then ended up not actually using the notebook so I thought I would repurpose it for this. I am also repurposing an old matchbox because it fits my letter stamps quite nicely. I found these ones in, gosh, where did I find them? Hobbycraft. They're a little bit battered, they're all covered in ink, but they work really well. And I think they look really nice. The picture in the background is one that I cut out of an RHS magazine. So I am an RHS member, it's the Royal Horticultural Society here in the UK. And it's a picture of RHS Wisley, which has got to be one of my favourite gardens ever. And it's the place that really got me into gardening. So I picked that as my front cover. And so this part I'd already set up, as I said, in my the old notebook, so it's something I found is particularly helpful. I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute, but I was just showing you that washi tape, which was a lovely present from my sister for Christmas. It's absolutely beautiful. I will see if I can figure out where she got it from, and I'll add it in the comments below. This is a photo that I took, oh gosh, in summer 2021, and I always like looking at it, and it reminds me of what my garden looks like in the summer. This was about a year and a half after we moved in, so I'd managed to do quite a lot in that time, and it always makes me quite happy looking at it, so I thought I'd pick that as my inspiration photo at the start of the book. And the other thing I like to do is repurpose old bags. So this is actually a bag that I got at RHS Wisley when I bought some plants from their garden centre that I've then torn into a nice shape to stick down and make a little bit of interest at the back. And brown paper I think always looks really nice in notebooks, and it's really easy and it looks quite smart at the same time. So you can also tear it if you sort of fold along the fold where you want to tear, and you can then put a ruler on the top of the fold and tear like that. It does also work, it just looks a little neater that way, but I prefer this slightly messy look. And actually to stick photos down I prefer double-sided sticky tape, so that's what I'm grabbing here, and that was another Hobbycraft purchase. But yeah, so a garden notebook is something that I've been meaning to keep up with a bit more than I really have done in the past. I know it's something that every gardener should really do, and it's funny because I'm always very good at journaling for other things. So I have my own personal journal, you know, I've kept a diary since I was, I don't know, 12 or something, and I'm fairly good at keeping up with that. But for some reason when it comes to my garden journal or a garden notebook, I'm absolutely dreadful. And I think it's because in the summer particularly things happen so quickly, and it can be quite difficult to actually keep up with all of the changes and making notes on what you're doing, especially when you've got a lot of things going on. So that's why I thought I'd bring you along. I thought hopefully this way I can incentivise myself to actually keep up with it, and if I make it look pretty, then it will be a nice thing to actually work with and focus on. So we'll see how it goes, and maybe I'll inspire some of you guys to join me as well with your own garden notebook. And you'll notice I use a lot of stamping in this because I do quite like the sort of look of the typewritten stamps, but equally you could not do that. This is actually sped up 2 times. The whole thing took me about 50 minutes in total to do all of what you're going to see in this video. So it can take a little bit of time if you're doing the stamping, but I do quite like the look of it. And I love these Staedler pens. They come in all shapes and sizes. I use them for the bits that I don't have stamps for, because I only have letter stamps. I don't have any numbers yet. That might be something I'll do in the future. find some of those. And so when I was stamping the letters for the word garden there, the corner of the stamp kept getting caught on the paper, so I thought I'd add a few little embellishments with pen to try and make them look a little less obvious. So that's the reason for this bit. But yes, I was saying earlier about the contents page, and I think that's always something really useful to have, is at the beginning of any notebooks, whatever you set up, it could be for work, it could be personal, whatever, just a very brief contents page, so you can write down, even on half a line like I think I did, so you can actually find things, and it's so helpful. So you may not, well, at this point you won't know this about me, but I have a PhD, I'm a chemical engineer by background, I did a PhD, and that was one of the things that I found the most useful during my PhD, was actually having a contents page at the start, because then you can find the things that you're looking for. Because you go, oh, well, I know I did that on some day, but when was it? I don't know which page it's on. So I'd actually sat down before this and had a thought through my garden goals for the year, and I think that's something quite useful to do, is to think about what do you actually want from your garden, what do you want to do with it this year, and that way you can focus your efforts into the areas that will really make you happy and the things that you actually want to achieve. So my goals for this year is I would really like a space that is calm and relaxing, and I want to feel I can escape the outside world, somewhere that I can just be and relax and enjoy. And the other part of this is I want to be able to have a garden that will be very productive, vegetables, cut flowers. I want to be able to bring in flowers into my house. You can see the flowers on the table there in the picture, they're actually ones that I got from the garden and I cut myself. And there's something so satisfying about that. And of course the other angle of that is I would like to be able to eat things from the garden. So it's really, really exciting to be growing things that are actually edible. I also want to try and do this on a budget. I want to keep it as low cost as I possibly can, and also minimum maintenance. I do work full time, and while I love being in the garden, it can be difficult sometimes to keep up a high maintenance schedule. So I'm going to try and do it with minimal maintenance, and if that means there's a few weeds, you know, there's a few weeds, that's alright. And I guess that kind of links to the sort of naturalistic and sustainable approach, and I try and take that approach with a lot of things that I do. So for example, using the paper, you know, I tore off the edge bits there to make that garden goals page, but those edge bits are going to go in the compost. Any paper scraps that I produce while I'm journaling, you know, they can go on the compost as well, and I'm trying really hard to actually do that a bit more. So this section here, it's always quite useful to make yourself a little note about what is your garden actually like, so what zone are you in. So I've actually written down the USDA hardiness zone there. Despite the fact that we're in the UK, it's useful to have as a reference because a lot of online resources and tips and tools and so on will use that. But generally for my garden it means that it's usually somewhere between -10 degrees C up to about 30 degrees. The summer just gone in the UK, we had an unseasonably high temperatures. I think actually one day it was like 37 or 38, which was really quite hot. So some of my plants didn't do particularly well last year, but usually that's the temperature range. I might decide to correct that after this year to up to 35, we'll see. And I managed to find online some information about the predicted first and last frosts. So our last frost we should expect to be at the end of April, and the first frost somewhere around mid-November. And I've put down some ideas about dates for seasons just to give an indication. Of course, with climate change, global warming, and all the rest of it, those things can change a little bit, but it's good to have an idea to start with. I always find the edges lift up, so I always have to stick down the corners. Okay, And so just to finish off this page, because there's a little bit of a gap down at the bottom, I'm going to use a little bit more of that beautiful washi tape and just fill in the gap. I'm just drinking builder's tea today. I used to be very experimental in my tea habits, and used to be very much a tea purist, but it's mostly just builder's tea now. Now, if you're old like me and you remember Blue Peter, here's something I prepared earlier. So these are garden plans of both my front and back garden. I've not filled in the plants, I've just put in sort of what things are where, and if you want to have a look in a bit more detail at this, then feel free to pause the video at this point. They are roughly to scale. I do need to go out and measure the garden properly, but this is what I have in terms of measurements from when I first moved in, so I've drawn everything to that sort of scale. And it's always useful to have a plan of some sort to sort of show the shape and the size of your garden. I've actually done a lot of work last year to revamp the front garden, so I dug out all of the plants that the new build company had provided us with, which my dad called, he called them supermarket car park plants, which I thought was very apt and also really annoyed me. So I was like, okay, I really need to do something about this. I'm not going to keep those in any longer. There were a huge amount of skimmia, which nice if they're a nice skimmia, but these were quite boring ones with just white flowers. I really like the pink ones, but they were a little bit dull, and there were so many of them as well. I think I dug out about 15, and I'm donating them all to a local school who will happily take them off my hands, which is great because I didn't want to just throw them away. It seemed a bit of a waste. They're currently sitting on the patio at the moment. But, there we go. There is a little bit of washi tape underneath the title there because it does have a little bit of identifying information, so I thought I'd cover that up. I've just glued these in, and then that right hand one will open up and can see both easily at a glance. And if you're sticking in big bits of paper like that, that tends to be my tactic for making sure it's all stuck down. So I have quite a small garden. It's about 7 metres in width and it's about 10 metres long. 3 metres of that is patio, so we had the patio put in. When we first moved in, there was just this tiny little paving slab patio with these really ugly pavers, and it was basically enough space for 2 chairs and a tiny table, and so we decided we wanted to add in a patio so that we actually had somewhere to sit in the summer. So we did that, and I've just been adding in beds and raised beds and everything else ever since. So the plan shows everything that's gone in since we moved in. There's this weird little corner at the back left as well, which is not particularly useful because you can't really put anything around there, but I've managed to fit in some compost bins and also a little greenhouse. Well, I call it a greenhouse. It's more of a lean-to with perspex windows. I'll have to show you a photo sometime. But it works quite well for keeping plants in a warm place and makes good use of the space. So the next thing I'm going to include is a list of all my plants. And I have quite a few in the garden. I may have gone a little bit overboard when I first moved in, and there's a lot of different types and just one thing, but lots of different things. So I'm going to write down the name of each of them, hopefully the scientific name if I can find that out, otherwise I'll just use the colloquial. And then where it is in the garden. So I don't know if you noticed, I did actually name each of the beds in the plans on the previous page. So I'll put down the bed name. And the other thing I'm adding at the bottom of the page here is a key for the location, so I can do an abbreviation which is quite helpful because there's a few plants that do turn up in several places. So I've got some lavender that's in various locations, and crocosmia as well, spread in various spots throughout the garden. I have 3 raised beds that are my vegetable beds, and then there's a 4th one to the right of the patio that's kind of a built-in with railway sleepers. And then the rest are all in-ground beds. Being a new build, the ground was awful, full of rubble, really solid, absolute nightmare to dig. So I tend to try and follow the no-dig method where I can, simply because it makes things a lot easier, a lot less effort, and actually the plants seem very happy. So, and that's the no-dig method is from Charles Dowding. You might want to look him up if you haven't heard of it. But there's a lot of people on YouTube who are talking about it, and it's a really, really good method. Okay, so I also have quite a few plants that are what I like to call in the waiting room, and they are sitting in pots on the patio, waiting to go into a space. And this is either because I can't work out where to put them, or because I bought them just before winter and then it got too cold, and so I've left them waiting to plant them out until the weather is a little warmer. But I kind of feel like it's useful to keep track of what I've got sitting, because I do have a habit of going to a garden centre and then buying all the plants, as I'm pretty sure a lot of other gardeners do. You see something pretty and you go, yeah, I'm definitely going to get that, there's definitely room in the garden, and then you get home and you realise that actually you were wrong, there is not. So I thought the most useful information here would be the name of the plant, how many of them I have. In some cases I have bought more than one. The pot size, and anything else that I can think of that might be useful. So for example, will it like a shady spot or a sunny spot? Is there a particular time I want to plant it? Is it a bulb or something rather than a plant, etc. Okay, my cat has just come to join me, so if you hear cat licks in the background, she is currently washing my hand. She may appear in a future video, you never know. But this particular page, when I started actually filling this out, I realised that I needed more space really than I gave myself. I underestimated how many seed packets I have in the cupboard. But the plan for this essentially is, what is the seed? When do I need to sow it by? What's the expiry date on the packet, if you like? And how many seeds does that packet come with? So I realise I've written plant by, I should have written sow by, but it's not the end of the world. And I will do a flip through at some point in the future of these filled out, and I have actually filled out every single row in there, so I have a few seeds to use up. So this page, I thought I'd include this in here before I start getting into individual months, because it's quite useful to have an overall list of things that you would like to get for the garden. Not necessarily things that you will end up getting, but I tend to find if I write it down somewhere, I can then think about it for a while and then decide whether it's actually something that I really do need to get, or if I just kind of want it. And the other part, rather than a to-do list, I have a page on the right there for projects, and so I'm going to divide this into ongoing projects, things that I'm working on at the moment, and plans that I have for the future, which I think is always useful to keep track of. And I'm sorry the bottom cut off here. I realised that a little too late, but there you go, you can see my cat stamp now. So I don't know about where you are, but we've just had a very wet few weeks, and I'm really, really eager to get back out again because I've got so much that I want to get done, so many projects that I'm still working on. But when everything's raining quite as much as it is, the ground is really soggy and boggy, and obviously it's bad to work it when it is like that. And of course you get wet and muddy as well, so it's all a little bit frustrating. So I'm missing being in the garden, and I'm very much looking forward to it drying up a little bit. So the other part of gardening, of course, is that things cost money. And you can end up spending a lot of money on a lot of things, particularly plants, which is probably my weakness. So I'm putting in an expenses tracker to try and keep track of exactly how much I'm spending on the garden this year. I'm only going to give myself 2 pages, and I'm doing that deliberately because I want to make sure that every purchase I make is actually one that I really need to do. So this goes back to one of my garden goals, which was to do all of this on a budget. So let's see how that goes. That's my typical headings is item, date and the amount. So I do a sort of tracker like this in my personal notebook as well for personal purchases. There's probably a little bit of overlap there because gardening is also a hobby. And a little bit more washi tape just to look pretty. I tend to prefer the look of this when it's torn rather than cut, so I tend to tear it off the roll and then I'll trim the edge so that it's a flat edge in the book. And of course you'll notice a lot of this, it's actually quite simple. I've not really done a huge amount of stuff in there. The thing that takes the time is the stamping, but most of the embellishments are really quite simple, and I've done that deliberately because it's something that I hope is going to be sustainable, because there aren't enough hours in the day. There we go. And so this is what the whole thing looks like at the end. I'll let you enjoy. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this, then please drop me a like down below. I'm going to come up with a few more of these, some garden tours. There's a lot of exciting things coming, so if you'd like to see that sort of stuff, then follow along. But it was really great to have you here, and thank you very much for watching. I'll let you enjoy the rest.